This week on Words and Numbers, a cure for blindness,
taxing the rich,
your mom,
and listener questions.
All that and more coming up on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
So what's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
One of our listeners sent us an article, and I'm looking here to see who this is, and I didn't write it down, so I apologize, whoever you were. But this is an article on taxing the rich. Appeared in The Hill, the Washington publication recently. Headline, most Americans say taxing the rich is the best way to reduce federal debt. That's a Gallup poll.
Well, can I weigh in on this real quick?
Please do.
That sounds great. Just don't tax me.
Oh, there's all kinds of problems here. One of which
sure,
is
but,
how you define the rich.
Of course, but if we're going to figure out who to tax, I'm going to find a group that is not me.
Right, yes.
And if that happens to be the rich, whatever the hell that is, fine by me. As long as I'm not in the group, go tax those people.
Well, according to this, I'm looking at the Gallup poll, before the latest government shutdown, almost half of U.S. adults said Congress should reduce the deficit. Now, this is interesting because the Gallup poll says deficit. The headline said debt. Reduce the deficit either mostly 27% or only 22% by cutting spending, whereas 17% favored relying mostly or only on tax increases. Another 27% said they would prefer an equal mix of spending cuts and tax hikes. And whenever this sort of thing comes up, people they start off with the tax cuts, and you very quickly come to the conclusion that there just simply isn't enough to cut to close. Forget about the debt, to close the deficit. And I can give you some perspective here.
You mean spending cuts?
Spending cuts, yeah, spending cuts. This fiscal year, the tax revenues the government brings in are not enough to fund the mandatory spending. So, in other words, you'd have to cut everything the government does except for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt, and you still wouldn't have closed the deficit. So very quickly, people who start off with, well, the way to fix this problem is to cut spending, they quickly find out that that's just not going to work. So the next step is, well, you can't cut spending, let's raise taxes. And you get the reaction you had, which is absolutely, let's raise taxes on the other guy.
Anybody but me is fine.
They look at the rich, and I ran these numbers just a couple of days ago because I wanted to update every few years my analysis of the Congressional Budget Office numbers showing who's paying how much tax. And the fun thing about this is that when you look at the congressional budget numbers, they will include how much you pay in tax, all federal taxes, so income taxes, estate taxes, capital gains taxes, payroll taxes, everything, all federal taxes. They'll look at how much you pay in taxes. They will also go a step further, which a lot of people won't do, and they'll account for tax credits. So places in which the tax code actually gives you money back that you never paid in the first place. And then CBO will go the next step, which almost nobody does, which is to look at transfers. So money the federal government just hands out to people, usually in the form of things like income assistance. And if you
or a COVID check.
COVID checks, for example, right. Yeah.
Which everybody loved.
Yeah, oh yeah, we loved it until the inflation came along in 2022. Yep. But that's another episode. But if you put all of that together, ask yourself how much people paid in taxes, how much did they get back in tax credits, how much did they receive in transfers, and when all the dust settles, ask the question, how much did they actually pay, right? So things like deductions and exemptions and write-offs are not part of this. All that's done. What did they actually pay? And the numbers here, James, are astounding, and they become more astounding every year.
Well, and
Bottom-
I remember when we wrote about this a bunch of years ago. It 60% of the American population were net takers from the government.
Yes. So the latest numbers are the bottom 20% of households by income are taxed at an effective rate of negative 115%.
Wow.
Negative 115%. So they end up more than twice as better off as they were prior to the whole tax and transfer thing when you're done.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge any of that. This is part of what we do to help the poor. Fine, but let's admit what's going on here, that they've got an effective net negative tax rate of 115%. The next 20% up, that quintile of households are, and I should have written it down, I believe it's negative 10%, roughly. And then you get to the middle class, their effective tax rate is 0. And to all of you who are in the middle class saying, that's not right, I pay taxes. Yes, you do pay taxes. And then you receive tax credits. And some of you receive transfers. And when we do the math, the average of you is paying 0. Federal.
How do I get more tax credits and transfers? That's the question that we got to get into here.
Oh, that boat sailed for you. You need more kids.
Oh, right. Those little tax deductions that I got every single year.
That's right. Yeah. And I can tell you, having had 6 kids, I felt every one of them as they reached age 18.
Oh, boy, age 18 was tough. I remember my middle child was born on December 21st. I referred to it as Daddy's little tax deduction. But also, Aunt, interest on your mortgage, deductible.
Yeah.
But this isn't exactly me getting money in my pocket. This is me paying less by way of tax.
Right.
How do the middle class get transfers?
Social Security counts as part of this. There's also, depending on where you are in the middle class, the middle 20% is a wide range. Depending on where you are in there and how many people are in your household, you may actually be qualified for some income assistance.
Wow, middle class.
Well, yeah, with lots of footnotes, but yes.
Lots of footnotes. Yeah, I get it. So we're probably still at around 60% who are net takers.
Yeah, you're around 60% who are receiving more from the federal government than they're paying in. And then you get to the top 1%. And that's the reason I bring that up, is because that's what people point to when they say, well, let's raise the taxes on the rich. The top 1% are paying an effective rate of 30%.
Yeah.
And this is
way more than everybody else.
Way more than everybody else. And this is where we have to be very careful, because of all of those groups, it's the top 1% that have the most mobility, the most ability to hire the lawyers and accountants and get around these things. So my point here is, you want to raise taxes, there's not much more you can squeeze out of the top 1%. However, think about the middle class. Now, we don't make as much as the top 1%, but we way outnumber them. And we're currently being taxed at a net of 0.
That's right. Look, if you're looking to solve a nationwide financial problem, the only place you can look is the middle class. Nothing else makes any sense. And once you sit down and just look at the numbers, it's not advanced math. It's basic math. It's like third grade math. You can look at it and say, well, there is no more to take from A. Now we have to move down to B.
Right.
And B is the middle class.
And
sorry.
To people who are listening to this and saying, well, what about those corporations? We should tax them. And let me remind you that corporations don't pay taxes, they collect taxes.
That's
and those taxes are ultimately paid either by the corporation's investors, who actually are going to include a lot of Americans, anyone who has stock in a 401k or an IRA. It's going to be paid by the corporation's customers in the form of higher prices. It's going to be paid by the corporation's employees in the form of reduced wages. The corporation simply collects the tax. It's the people who pay it.
In an honest system, we would have a corporate tax rate of 0%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we would just pay everything on the income side.
And this is the thing that
because that makes it transparent.
And it makes me so mad about corporate taxes. They're the perfect vehicle for politicians to raise taxes on the people without appearing to raise taxes on the people. In fact, the people cheer and say, yeah, put it to the corporation,
That's right.
Not realizing that the voters themselves are the ones who are going to end up paying.
It's literally the same thing as the tariffs.
Yes, right.
You will pay it in the end because that's how this works, right? You raise taxes, people pay those taxes.
We're happy to announce that civil members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a members-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, philosophy, and economics. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. In this week's session, which starts this Thursday at 5:30 Eastern Time, we'll talk about the knowledge problem. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to Civil at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. When you log into civil.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series, as well as the collection of all of our episodes of Words and Numbers and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to Civil for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription. I've come to the conclusion, as someone who listens to this and says, okay, well, Davies is saying we can't cut spending. There's not enough spending to cut to make a difference, and we can't raise taxes because really that's going to be raising on ultimately the middle class. What do? I've come to the conclusion that something you and I wrote about years ago we wrote about it as a possible solution. I've come to the conclusion that it is the only solution. And that is, you've got to freeze the government. You can't cut the spending, you can't raise the taxes, so you hold the government in stasis. No cost increases. Whatever the government spent this year, that's as much as it can spend next year and the year after that and the year after that. And you hold it there for about 10 years. And in doing so, the economy catches up. And when the economy catches up, it starts generating more and more tax revenue. And about 5 to 10 years down the road, you'll have your first balanced budget.
Imagine that. It's never going to happen, but imagine that.
And I'm sorry, but that's the weird thing. It's never going to happen, and yet that's the only solution. That's
right, but it's never going to happen.
Yep.
So I want to get us to something that's actually a lot more hopeful. 5 people in England who have a disease called dry age-related macular degeneration, AMD, who are blinded by it, have received an implant directly onto their eyeballs of a microchip, and they can see again.
Yeah.
This form of blindness has been cured. That's remarkable.
Yeah. With a
How
microchip.
about that?
That is so cool.
How about that? We actually have finally gotten to the level of the bionic eye.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how soon now before they fine-tune those microchips to get us all better vision?
Right.
Can I see like Ted Williams? Ted Williams had 20/40 vision. His vision was twice as good as everybody else's. I can never remember which of the good numbers
which way
comes
the numbers
first.
Go. Right, yeah.
Can I get that? Because I can barely read a book now I can't read a book now without eyeglasses.
Oh, you get infrared or the night vision.
Oh, man, I'd love night vision. That'd be really cool. And how soon before this becomes ubiquitous?
Mm-hmm.
I understand it's only for one thing, one disease, but 250 people in the UK have that disease and 5 million people worldwide have that disease. This is a big deal that those people, 5 million people, do not have to go blind now.
Right.
Well, how about that? That's just fantastic. This is why I so often like talking about medical and scientific news instead of political things. Because there are these wonders that come up. And hey, all those people who say, well, they never cure anything? Up yours. Look what they just did. People are trying to cure things every day.
I know people with this, and the interesting thing is there are drugs that will hold it at bay, won't cure it, but will hold it at bay. But with the way technology is going, that's all you have to do. Hold it at bay, because 10 years from now, there'll be some new wonderful thing that does, like you're describing.
That you'll be able to afford.
Right, yes, yeah, right.
Right? It's not only that it's going to be out there, you'll be able to have it.
Yep.
Right, and ain't that something? And from the incredible to the ridiculous, it's time for the foolishness of the weekend. I've already given you a hint. Do you have any idea who the big winner is this week?
No, because you mentioned it so long ago, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, you're an old man. You can't remember any.
No, it's not that at all. We should tell our listeners that we're recording this on the day that a third of the internet went down.
Yeah.
So we spent an hour and a half trying and failing to record an episode, and moved over to various platforms before we finally got this going. So no, I have no idea what you were talking about.
We've been at this for some hours today to give you nice people the entertainment that we can give you, which probably isn't nearly as good as many of your other options. But hey, man, here we are together. The foolishness of the week, and I think this is a first, goes to Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary for Donald Trump, who, when asked who decided that a meeting was going to be held in Hungary, got irked by the question. It was sent via text, by the way, and she responded, "Your mom."
I'm sorry, it's just so ridiculous.
Our government has become
press
so
secretary.
Classless. Our government has become so classless that your mother jokes are part of the public process now. And I can tell you that I remember a day, and you do too, when if a press secretary had said that, he would have been fired immediately.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Immediately. No questions asked. Whoever it was, man, woman, or child, been out of that office before ass hit chair. And this time we all just kind of guffaw and move on like it's no big deal.
And this is, one could argue with Trump's policies. I don't even think you need to go there. The thing that I think he has done to damage the presidency more than anything else is to make it banal. He's brought a level of what's the right word? Crassness?
Yeah, crassness. Foolishness, crassness, boyishness.
Yeah. It's unbecoming of people in a regular day-to-day business, let alone the president of the United States.
So the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Everybody's crass all the time now. Okay.
Somebody told me recently, I didn't see it, if indeed it's true, but somebody told me that he created an AI video of him in a plane flying over the No Kings protesters, dropping poop on them.
Poo, yes, that's right. Poo.
The president of the United States made that video.
I'm pretty sure he didn't make the video. I don't think he's got the wherewithal to do it. But he told somebody to make it for him, and that person did that, and then he took it and he released it.
Yeah.
Tell me, can you imagine Ronald Reagan doing such a thing?
Oh my God.
How about Jimmy Carter? Let's do a both sides example. You think either of those guys would have done this? How about George W. Bush or Barack Obama?
Yeah.
No. And Trump does it, and the masses applaud. His followers think it's the greatest thing ever because he's exactly as crass as they are.
What comes next? The next
I don't know.
president. How do you restore, or does he even try to restore dignity to the office?
I don't know. And more to that point, Ant, I don't know what's going to come tomorrow, let alone in 5 years, because we seem to reach a new depth pretty often. And just standard human decency is out the window because this gives tremendous license to people to behave badly, and they take it. But it's only the foolishness of the week. It's not the end of the world.
We're now supposed to talk about the episode.
Your mother. Your mother. I don't know. That just doesn't sound right. I wanted to try it and see if it was offensive. It kind of is, but it isn't really. I don't know.
I want to hit on some listener email. Jessica Sims Bowen wrote us following our episode on Social Security. And Jessica, we've known Jessica for a number of years. She's a teacher, and she's talking about teachers here. She says municipal workers, including teachers.
She and I went to a Red Sox game together. Can you imagine that?
Oh, did you really?
Fenway Park. It was one of the all-time great days.
Huh. She says municipal workers, and including teachers who are on state, I'll say pseudo social security systems. That is, there are instances in which people are exempt from Social Security, but you've got to be on a roughly equivalent system. Typically, these are at the state level. We talked about Kentucky teachers who have their own in-state system that is like Social Security, but it's run by Kentucky. Jessica says municipal workers, including teachers who are on these systems, face problems if they change careers or move out of state, which had never occurred to me till she said this. Their money doesn't follow them.
How about
she
that?
She says, if I wanted to switch to a private sector job, I can't roll my teacher pension payments into a private fund or even into Social Security itself. It's just lost. And remember, there's this rule with Social Security that you're not eligible for benefits unless you've paid in for, is it 10 years? They measure it in quarters. Maybe it's 40 quarters or something. But you have to have paid in for a number of years before you become eligible. So imagine that you're a teacher on one of these state-run systems and you're, let's say, 5 years from retirement. You're stuck. You can't leave and move on to a job that's in the Social Security system, because not only will you be giving up the retirement from the state system, but you'll never become eligible for Social Security because you won't have enough of a job history.
Yep, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, that's astounding. I had not considered that. In a way, I guess it's, if you want to say beneficial, it's beneficial for the state governments in that they have a pool of essentially captive workers. The workers can't leave.
Yeah, you hate to look at things like that, though, right? I mean, that's really awful. And look, anytime you devise a large system or a bunch of large systems, certain human beings are always going to fall through the cracks. That's just simply going to happen. You can't be specific enough in the rules to cover everybody exactly the way you want. And how do you know this is going to happen? Every time Congress gets a crazy idea and says, yes, we will do this, it then next creates a massive bureaucracy to make it so. And if you've been to the Department of Motor Vehicles in your home state, you know what a massive bureaucracy looks like at the end of the chain, because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And there are rules. And if you show up with every document you need, you can proceed to rule number 2. If not, you have to go home and get the documents you need, and on and on and on.
The maddening thing about or I shouldn't say maddening, the dangerous thing about that bureaucracy that you describe is that it creates its own constituency. That is, the people who work in the bureaucracy now have an incentive for the bureaucracy to continue and hopefully
and to grow.
Expand.
And to
grow. Now, if that bureaucracy is, for example, serving the poor, all of a sudden you've set up a system in which the people who work there have an economic interest in poverty remaining a problem. Because if it's ever solved, the bureaucracy is now out of work.
That's right. This is the March of Dimes problem, right, against muscular dystrophy. And people used to leave a dime in this placard that was kept near every cash register in every store. And the hope was that by these little tiny donations of 10 cents, enough money would be raised. It was muscular dystrophy, wasn't it?
I believe that March of Dimes, yeah, muscular dystrophy, yeah.
And then they achieved their goal. What do you do now? Well, nothing, apparently. Mothers Against Drunk Driving had a completely different answer. They lobbied hard for years to get the blood alcohol rate to a uniform 0.08% nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
And they said once that happened, drunk driving fatalities would decrease. They actually pulled it off.
Yep.
It was a long shot, but they pulled it off. And lo and behold, traffic fatalities due to drunk driving went down.
Hmm.
How about that? But Mothers Against Drunk Driving didn't disband. Having achieved their goal, they just picked new goals.
Right.
Now it's got to be a lower percentage. Now we got to go after pot smokers and things like this, right? There's always some other group to go get when your job is on the line.
Well, yeah,
so too bureaucrats, right? Their jobs are on the line. If they succeed and there's no more of whatever X is, then they'll have to go home without a job.
Yeah, and there are two things to say here. One is that, look, here's this organization, and it was successful in achieving this thing, and it's built, it's got the infrastructure there. What other good things can we do? And that's, granted, I'll give all of that. But then there's also this other thing that is also true, which is the people involved have a direct economic incentive to find anything, even if it's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, we prefer it to be a good thing, but
or
their immediate goals,
or a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't even have to be a real thing.
Well, an example is a lot of, I won't say all, but a lot of the racial, quote unquote, problems that you hear about at their root aren't necessarily always racial problems so much as something that has been fomented by people who have an economic incentive for racial problems to persist.
That's right. It's the civil rights industry, not the civil rights movement. Right? We have race hustlers all over the place whose only goal is to foment difficulty between people. Because when there is that difficulty, they can capitalize on it.
And you can tell them over time, if nothing else, because they'll be the people who are front and center in the cameras when someone has raised an accusation that something bad has happened to me and so forth. But when, not always, but when it does happen that the accusation is proved false or the person recants, that person who was in front of the cameras, nowhere to be seen.
Never to be found again. Yeah. And I'll go maybe even a step further or half a step further. But when the shakedown happens, right, when a corporation is found guilty of being insufficiently sympathetic to whatever cause we're looking at, and somebody says, therefore, you must fund the following initiatives.
Right.
That person right there, there's your problem. This is nearly 100% true.
As you're talking about this, it's reminding me of when I was a kid, the big thing that I remember was all of the species that were going extinct. And the nonprofits that were working to get the Endangered Species Act passed, and then getting species put on the endangered species list and all that stuff. And in all kinds of push toward that. And it became very hard to get the species off the list subsequently. Because again, there's an incentive to keep as many on there as you can because you stay in business.
Right. And what's the best way to keep a species alive? Serve it for dinner.
It is.
It isn't. People don't want to hear that, but there is no shortage of cows.
Right.
Cows don't become endangered because it's in everybody's interest to take care of the cows. So if you wanted to save the spotted owl, you should have got it on the drive-through menu at McDonald's. There'd be spotted owl everywhere.
James and I are delighted to be working with Civil. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. Civil's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what James and I have been talking about for years. Civil helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating these to our listeners in a way that we hope they find enjoyable. To see Civil's extensive list of content, including our podcast, Words and Numbers, and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. There are all these resources out there, some of them mineral resources, some of them animals, some of the air, what have you, all these things out there that humans use. humans have an incentive to use the resources.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether, you outlaw the use of the thing or you put it on the endangered species. We still have an incentive to use it. Now you're trying to balance the incentive with, punishment on the other end. But what you have not done is to give the human an incentive to husband the resource.
Yep. Carrots, not sticks.
Yeah, what does give the human the incentive to husband the resource is if he can make a profit at it.
Yep.
And a beautiful example our friend Howie Bacher writes about in his book, Free Our Markets, which I highly recommend.
I do too.
He looks at Zimbabwe and Zaire in Africa. And this was back in the, I want to say 80s to 90s, but it's like a 20, 30-year period. And he's looking at these two countries specifically because at the same time, one of them outlawed the trade in ivory and the other one didn't. And of course, the problem at the time was poachers were killing the elephants and cutting off their tusks and all of this thing. And if you move forward 20 years and look at these two countries, you would think the knee-jerk is, well, the country that outlawed the trade in ivory, they protected their elephant population, so they got more elephants. And the other one that didn't, well, then, people just killed off the elephants. They don't have any elephants. It was actually the reverse. That the elephant population in the country that outlawed the trade in ivory, their elephant population was decimated. The other one, the country that said, yeah, it's fine, go ahead and trade in ivory, their elephant population flourished. Why? Because in both countries, people had an incentive to harvest the elephants, but only in one did they have an incentive to husband them, to grow them, to raise them, to protect them.
It's interesting when you think it through, right? It doesn't quite sound right, but the minute you hear the explanation, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, I used to tell my students every year about the Christmas tree. I said, look, what do we do? In 150 million, 200 million households in the U.S., and every year, Christmas time, each one goes out and cuts down a tree, and we put it in the living room, we sing gleeful songs to it, and then 2 weeks later, we throw it in the garbage. And seems to be a recipe for massive deforestation. And yet there's no shortage of Christmas trees. Why? Because everybody wants to do that. So if I've got 5 acres of land, you can bet I'm going to go plant Christmas trees. I'll cut it down and I'll plant more the next year.
And I live in the desert, and I know where to go buy a Christmas tree in December.
Right.
They sell them even here.
Right.
Where no Christmas trees can possibly grow. And there's never a shortage. For exactly the reason you say, because it's in somebody's interest after cutting one down to plant 5 more.
Yes, right.
Right, it's always that second step. Poachers don't have a second step. Entrepreneurs have a second step.
And that's an interesting thing going back to this story of Zaire and Zimbabwe. And I forget which country is which, but in the country that outlawed the trade in ivory, what would happen? Just, of course, the thing's outlawed, but there are people still trying to get the ivory. The poachers would come in the dead of night, they'd kill the elephant, chainsaw, cut off its tusks, and get out of there, leaving, the 98% of the animal there to rot. In the other country that allowed it, what did they do? They didn't just, if the village would own a bunch of elephants and you keep them however one manages to keep elephants. And they would not kill them, but specifically kill the older males that, they're not going to breed or what have you. And not just kill them, but to sell safari rights. So rich Westerners, for $50,000, you come in, you can kill an elephant with the elephant gun, not any elephant, the one they specifically say. Right? So we got your $50,000. What are we going to do with $50,000? We invest it in raising the elephants, making sure they're healthy and well fed. Oh, and the elephant that was killed, okay, fine. The guy who killed it, he can take the tusks, that kind of a thing. But the meat, we'll harvest that and we'll sell it. We'll feed people. And all of a sudden you can see the resources being well used versus the other country where it's just hack off what you want and get out of there.
Get out. An entrepreneur always has more to do with the materials in front of him.
Yeah.
Right. You're never in and out quickly. You're in and you do the first thing, then you do the second thing, then you do the third thing. until you've exploited all the resources you can possibly exploit. Then you move on to your next thing.
Yeah. Why? Because you're earning a profit doing this. The profit incentive causes you to husband the resource.
And notice I use the word exploit in a positive way.
Right, right.
This is not a negative, right? We all exploit resources every day in our own lives, and I wish I could exploit more.
Well, I had another listener question. It was from our friend Chris Wilcox, but you stole it from me and used it in the previous episode. So I have nothing else.
Tough on Chris Wilcox, I guess, right? Chris is a good friend, and I'm happy to say his name repeatedly here on the show. I don't know. Is there anything else to talk about this week? We're talking about bombing or infiltrating or attacking Venezuela. That's good fun.
Something happened that bothers me. I had mentioned earlier that 1/3 of the internet went down today.
Yeah.
From the little bit that I read, of course, it's preliminary stuff. It was a data center here in Northern Virginia that some DNS setting got screwed up on it, what have you.
Yeah.
But
something very simple.
But so many of the things that I had to do today got waylaid because of that. And what went through my mind is, what happens when we have something at the level of COVID? And I don't mean like a communicable disease, but I mean, what happens when something happens to the internet that has that magnitude of impact that COVID had?
You know, it's interesting, Ant, because people talk all the time. There's always a lot of tough talk and nonsense about how when society collapses, I'm ready, right? You've met these people. You most certainly are not.
Yeah.
Nobody's ready for that. Nobody's ready for that. If you think you want that, you're an idiot. Nobody should want that. That's crazy talk. And we would get just a little tiny glimpse of it. Imagine, Ant, if the internet disappeared for a week.
For a week, yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing gone, down for a week. People would be utterly lost. And then they would be literally lost too, right? Because they wouldn't be able to get directions anywhere. And nobody knows how to use a map anymore. And nobody remembers where anybody lives. And nobody remembers
to go anywhere because they couldn't read their calendar.
That's right. Imagine.
And they couldn't contact. This is the interesting thing. Even if the internet went down, but the phone service was still up, they wouldn't be able to contact people because nobody knows people's phone numbers.
Yeah, I could only contact the few people who are already on my list.
Yeah. I mean, look, I talk to you almost daily and have done so for the past 20 years. I have no idea what your phone number is.
nor I yours. Not a single clue.
I barely know what my own is.
Yeah, I have to think about it from time to time. But, I mean, imagine how life would grind to a halt if the internet, something that we all just, I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when there wasn't one.
Right.
The pre-internet days. I think, is it fair to say that most people alive in the United States now don't remember that?
That's probably fair. Yeah.
We're probably, if not there, we're at a tipping point right about now. And people would not know how to live without this resource. And it's absolutely a resource.
You think about not just living, but businesses couldn't conduct business. Nothing's on paper anymore.
That's
I mean, how do you pay the person at McDonald's for the burger?
How do you pay your mortgage?
Yeah.
But then again, how does the mortgage company know you didn't pay your mortgage?
Yeah, there's that too. Right.
Maybe everybody wins, right? Except the mortgage company.
But the thing that scared me particularly about this is it was, if the article is to be believed, it was one data center here and one thing that was done wrong.
Yeah.
And it really underlined how fragile the internet is ultimately.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem that hasn't built up resilience. And, I see survivalists building Faraday cages so they can have their devices after the crash. And But why would you need them? There will be nothing to use them with.
There'll be nothing to connect to. Right.
But this is just a disaster that we're looking at here. And, it made our day today very difficult. It ruined a number of things throughout the course of my day. And I lived well over 2,000 miles away from that. And nonetheless, here I am, irked still about all the grief and aggravation I had all day long. And it was only 6 hours.
Right.
Right. That 6 hours is the blink of an eye. Imagine a week. And then come back and tell me that you're ready for anything that might hit. Because wherever you live, there's only a 3-day supply of food there. Because there's always only a 3-day supply of food anywhere. Well, good luck to you. If everything went down for a week and you had food for 3 days, you're going to be living in a riot before long. Because the mob will figure out who planned ahead. Mobs figure that out a lot.
And there's an interesting bifurcation there. The problem, having lived in an urban and a rural setting, I could tell you the problem is not going to be in rural America. The problem is going to be in urban America.
That's right. You don't go out hunting in the middle of the city.
Well, forget about hunting. I mean, people in rural America tend to stock up naturally on stuff because that's
Yep.
what you do. The season for beans comes along and you can a bunch of beans.
Yep, that's right. So one little 6-hour glimpse into how irritating life can get. I would prefer if we didn't have any more of this for a very long time.
Yeah, that would be good.
This was really irksome, but apparently it's over. We got through this recording. Everything's fine. And I'm going to go have dinner because I'm getting a little cranky. So, Ant, until we meet again in these shallow waters, be nice to each other. I know it's hard. It's hard for me right now too. The anger with the hunger comes hard in me, as you might well imagine. And I want some fried chicken. So I'm going to go eat some fried chicken and then I'm going to be nice to people. Catch you next time, man.
Next time. At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government. But fundamentally, all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect. The people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.